Tonight, the boundaries between legend and history dissolve like shadows cast by torchlight on ancient stone. Feel the air heavy with frankincense and the phantom weight of secrets that have shaped the destiny of kings and kingdoms for 7 centuries. If this journey touches your soul, join us again and whisper from where you listen to us. Now, dim the lights, breathe deeply. Let us dream with memories that are not our own. I walk across the worn limestone of Jerusalem's Temple Mount, where the morning sun casts long shadows between the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But my eyes see deeper than the present, through layers of Islamic architecture, past Byzantine churches, beyond Roman temples, to the very foundations where Solomon's temple once stood in all its biblical glory. Here, in chambers carved from living rock 2 millennia before Christ, lies the beginning of the greatest treasure mystery in Western history. The year is 1119, and I feel the presence of 9 French knights as they approach the gates of Jerusalem, their horses' hooves echoing against stones still warm with the blood of the First Crusade's conquest. These men, Hugh de Payenne, Godfrey de Saint-Omer, and their 7 companions, carry themselves with the bearing of nobles, yet they have taken vows of poverty that seem to mock their aristocratic heritage. They call themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. But the local Frankish lords whisper that there is more to their mission than protecting Christian pilgrims on the dangerous roads to the Holy Land. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem receives them in his palace with the calculating gaze of a ruler who has learned to read men's souls through their ambitions. These knights ask for nothing, no lands, no titles, no payment for their services. They request only permission to establish their headquarters in the ruins of Solomon's temple, in the very place where the Ark of the Covenant once rested in the Holy of Holies. The king grants their request, perhaps sensing that their true purpose lies not in the roads above, but in the mysteries below. I observe the careful way these 9 knights establish their presence on the Temple Mount. While they publicly patrol the pilgrim routes, their real work begins in the pre-dawn hours, when Jerusalem sleeps and only the desert wind witnesses their activities. They excavate, they measure, they map the subterranean chambers that honeycomb the bedrock beneath the ancient temple platform. Their tools are not the swords and lances of typical crusaders, but the picks and shovels of men searching for something specific, something precious, something that has waited in darkness for nearly 2,000 years. The local population watches these strange nights with growing curiosity and suspicion. Why do 9 men claim to protect thousands of pilgrims? Why do they refuse donations and live in deliberate poverty while occupying the most sacred site in Christendom? Why do their excavations continue month after month, year after year, as if they are following some ancient map that guides them through the labyrinth beneath Jerusalem's holiest ground? The whispers that reach my phantom ears speak of discoveries that would shake the foundations of both Christianity and Islam. In chambers sealed since the destruction of Herod's temple in 70 CE, these knights allegedly find artifacts that predate the birth of Christ, scrolls that contain the true history of the Jewish people, treasures that escaped the Roman legions, sacred objects that carry the power to legitimize or destroy the claims of any earthly kingdom. But the greatest discovery, according to the legends that will grow around these mysterious nights, is not gold or silver or precious stones. In the deepest vault, carved from the bedrock itself, they find knowledge, ancient wisdom that reveals the true nature of divinity, the secret teachings that Jesus shared only with his closest disciples, the esoteric traditions that connect Judaism, Christianity, and the mystery religions of the ancient world. The transformation of these 9 poor knights begins almost immediately after their arrival in Jerusalem. Within a decade, they have evolved from obscure French nobles into the most powerful military and financial organization in medieval Europe. Their wealth appears to flow from sources that no chronicler can adequately explain, not from donations, not from conquest, not from trade, but from some mysterious reservoir that seems inexhaustible. I watch as messengers arrive from Europe bearing news that will change the course of history. Pope Honorius II has officially recognized the Knights Templar as a religious order, granting them privileges that place them beyond the authority of local bishops and kings. They answer only to the Pope himself, and even that authority will prove more theoretical than practical as their power grows beyond anything the medieval world has ever seen. The Rule of the Temple, written by the influential abbot Bernard of Clairvaux, establishes the framework for an organization that is simultaneously monastic and military, spiritual and temporal, European and Eastern. These knights take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, yet they will become the wealthiest institution in Christendom. They dedicate themselves to protecting pilgrims, yet they will develop the most sophisticated intelligence network of their age. They serve Christ, yet they will be accused of worshiping demons and practicing heretical rites. The evening light slants across the Temple Mount as I contemplate the magnitude of what these 9 knights may have discovered in the darkness beneath my feet. If the legends are true, they found not just treasure, but the keys to power itself, knowledge that could topple kingdoms, artifacts that could legitimize dynasties, secrets that could reshape the religious landscape of medieval Europe. The mystery that begins in these ancient chambers will span 7 centuries and cross continents, inspiring countless treasure hunters, conspiracy theorists, and romantic dreamers. It will survive the destruction of the Templar Order, the execution of its leaders, and the systematic attempt by kings and popes to erase its memory from history. The treasure of the Knights Templar, whether real or imagined, will prove more durable than the knights themselves. Standing on the Temple Mount as darkness falls over Jerusalem, I understand that I am witnessing the birth of a legend that will outlive empires. The 9 knights who began their excavations in these sacred chambers have set in motion a mystery that will captivate human imagination for centuries to come, a quest that will lead from the Holy Land to the castles of Europe, from the torture chambers of the Inquisition to the remote islands of the North Atlantic. The morning mist clings to the walls of Jerusalem like the breath of ancient prophets as I observe the 9 French knights who will transform from obscure crusaders into the most powerful organization in medieval Christendom. Hugh de Payens, their leader, moves through the narrow streets with the purposeful stride of a man following a destiny written in stars and stone. But beneath his humble exterior lies a mind shaped by secrets that predate his arrival in the Holy Land by decades, perhaps centuries. I follow these phantom knights as they establish their modest quarters in the ruins of Solomon's Temple, their few possessions a stark contrast to the magnificent palaces that surround them in the Frankish kingdom of Jerusalem. Yet there is something in their bearing, something in the way they survey the ancient stones beneath their feet that suggests they are not the simple pilgrims they claim to be. Their leader, Hugh de Payens, carries himself with the confidence of a man who knows exactly what he seeks and where to find it. The official story of their founding reads like a tale of spontaneous religious inspiration. 9 knights moved by piety to protect Christian pilgrims on the dangerous roads between the coast and Jerusalem. But the deeper I delve into their origins, the more I discover connections that stretch back through the noble families of Champagne and Burgundy, through the reformed monasteries of Cluny and Citeaux, to the very heart of a spiritual and intellectual renaissance that is quietly transforming medieval Europe. Brother Bernard of Clairvaux, the Cistercian monk who will become their most powerful advocate, already knows of their mission before they officially request his support. His letters, preserved in monastery archives, reveal a man who understands the cosmic significance of what these knights are attempting. They are the new Maccabees, he writes to a fellow abbot, chosen to restore what was lost when the temple fell to Roman fire. The genealogical connections between these 9 founding knights reveal a web of relationships that suggests careful planning rather than spontaneous inspiration. Hugh de Payens is related by marriage to the Count of Champagne, who had visited Jerusalem years earlier and returned with tales of ancient mysteries hidden beneath the Temple Mount. Godfrey de Saint-Omer traces his lineage to the very Godfrey of Bouillon, who conquered Jerusalem in the First Crusade. These are not random pilgrims, but members of an interconnected network of noble families who share common interests and, perhaps, common knowledge. I observe the careful way they conduct their excavations beneath the temple platform, working in shifts, always maintaining guards above ground. They follow what appears to be a predetermined plan. Their digging is not random exploration, but systematic archaeology, as if they possess maps or descriptions that guide them to specific locations. The local Muslim population, still adjusting to Frankish rule, watches these activities with growing unease, sensing that something more significant than simple construction is taking place. The tools they use reveal the sophistication of their operation. These are not crude implements hastily assembled in Jerusalem, but specialized equipment brought from Europe. Measuring devices, surveying instruments, and excavation tools that suggest knowledge of engineering principles far advanced for their time. Some historians will later speculate that they possessed copies of ancient Roman surveys of the Temple Mount, or even older Jewish texts that describe the hidden chambers beneath the sacred platform. I watch as the transformation in their circumstances begins almost immediately after their arrival. Within months, donations begin flowing to their cause from sources across Europe. Not the small offerings of pious pilgrims, but substantial grants from wealthy nobles and reformed monasteries. The Count of Champagne himself takes the unprecedented step of joining their order, abandoning his vast estates to become a simple knight brother under the command of his former vassal, Hugh de Payens. I watch as their reputation spreads through the network of reformed monasteries that stretches across Europe like an underground river of spiritual renewal. The Cistercians, the reformed Benedictines, the cathedral schools of Chartres and Paris, all become centers of support for these mysterious knights whose mission seems to resonate with the deepest aspirations of medieval Christendom's intellectual elite. The theological justification for their existence comes from Bernard of Clairvaux himself, who develops the concept of the new knighthood, warriors who fight not for earthly glory, but for spiritual purposes, monks who take up arms not in violation of their vows, but in fulfillment of them. His treatise, In Praise of the New Knighthood, provides the intellectual framework that will allow these knights to reconcile their monastic vows with their military activities. But beneath Bernard's public advocacy lies a deeper understanding of what these knights represent. His private correspondence reveals a man who believes that the end times are approaching, that the recovery of ancient wisdom is necessary to prepare Christendom for the final battle between good and evil. The Knights Templar, in his vision, are not just protectors of pilgrims, but guardians of sacred knowledge that must be preserved for the coming apocalypse. The Rule of the Temple, which Bernard helps to draft, contains provisions that seem oddly specific for a simple military order. The knights are forbidden to reveal the details of their chapter meetings to outsiders. They are required to maintain absolute secrecy about their activities and discoveries. They are granted unprecedented autonomy from local church and secular authorities. These provisions suggest an organization designed not just for military purposes, but for the preservation and protection of sensitive information. The rapid expansion of their influence across Europe reveals the existence of a support network that must have been established before their official founding. Within a decade of their recognition by the Pope, they possess properties in France, England, Spain, Portugal, and the German states. Their recruitment draws not just from the military nobility, but from the intellectual elite. Scholars, architects, engineers, and financiers who bring skills that seem oddly suited to treasure hunting rather than pilgrim protection. The mystery deepens as I observe their construction projects in Jerusalem. While publicly maintaining their headquarters in the modest quarters assigned to them by King Baldwin, they undertake extensive renovations that include the creation of underground chambers, secret passages, and storage facilities that seem designed for purposes far beyond simple accommodation. The local stonemasons they employ are sworn to secrecy about the details of their work. As the sun sets over Jerusalem, casting long shadows across the Temple Mount, I realize that these 9 knights have initiated something far more significant than a military order. They have begun a transformation that will reshape medieval Europe's understanding of power, wealth, and sacred knowledge. The treasure they seek beneath Solomon's temple may be real or imaginary, but the consequences of their search will prove all too tangible in the centuries to come. The darkness beneath the Temple Mount swallows torchlight like a living thing as I descend stone steps carved by hands that knew the secrets of Solomon's architects. The air grows thick with the weight of centuries, heavy with dust that has not been disturbed since Roman legions destroyed Herod's temple in 70 CE. Here, in chambers that predate Christ himself, the 9 Knights Templar conduct their most sacred and secretive work, following maps that may have been drawn by the very builders who served the wisest king in Israel's history. Brother Hugh de Payens holds his torch high as he examines hieroglyphic inscriptions that cover the walls of a chamber so ancient that its purpose has been forgotten by history. These are not the Hebrew letters one might expect beneath the Jewish temple, but symbols that speak of even older mysteries, Egyptian wisdom, Phoenician knowledge, perhaps even traces of the lost civilization that some scholars believe preceded the Great Flood described in Genesis. The excavation has revealed a complex of underground chambers that extends far beyond what the knights initially expected. Using techniques learned from the master builders of the great cathedrals rising across Europe, they have mapped a subterranean city that rivals anything known to medieval archaeology. Storage rooms, ritual chambers, libraries carved from living rock, and at the deepest level, a vault sealed with stones so massive that moving them requires knowledge of engineering principles that seem almost supernatural. I observe the careful way they document each discovery. Brother Godfrey de Saint-Omer, who studied at the Cathedral School of Chartres before taking his crusading vows, sketches architectural details with the precision of a master mason. His drawings reveal chambers built according to sacred geometry, proportions that echo the measurements given in the Bible for Solomon's temple, mathematical relationships that connect earthly architecture with celestial harmonies. The artifacts they uncover challenge everything medieval Christianity believes about the ancient world. Scrolls written in languages that predate Hebrew, astronomical instruments that demonstrate knowledge of celestial mechanics supposedly unknown until Copernicus, maps that show continents that European scholars insist do not exist. Each discovery forces them to confront the possibility that the ancient world possessed wisdom that has been lost to their own age. The most significant find comes in the 7th year of their excavations, when they break through the seal of the deepest vault. The chamber beyond contains not gold or silver, though precious metals are certainly present, but something far more valuable, a library that appears to preserve the collected wisdom of the ancient world. Scrolls in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, Aramaic, and languages they cannot identify fill stone shelves that stretch into darkness beyond their torchlight. Among these ancient texts, they discover documents that will shake the foundations of their faith. Gospels that do not appear in the Christian Bible. Jewish texts that describe the temple's construction in terms that suggest knowledge of advanced engineering. Egyptian papyri that reveal the mathematical principles underlying the pyramid's construction. Most disturbing of all, they find records that suggest the historical Jesus may have been initiated into mystery traditions that Orthodox Christianity has forgotten or deliberately suppressed. The copper scroll, written in Hebrew, but describing treasures in terms that suggest vast wealth, provides what appears to be an inventory of the temple's hidden riches. But the knights quickly realize that the real treasure is not the gold and silver described in the scroll, but the knowledge contained in the library itself, wisdom that could transform their understanding of history, religion, and the very nature of reality. Brother André de Montbard, uncle to the influential Bernard of Clairvaux, serves as the expedition's theologian and interpreter of ancient texts. His background in Reformed monasticism has prepared him to recognize the significance of what they are discovering. These texts, he realizes, preserve traditions that connect Judaism, Christianity, and the mystery religions of the ancient world in ways that Orthodox theology has never acknowledged. The architectural discoveries prove equally revolutionary. The chambers beneath the Temple Mount reveal construction techniques that seem to anticipate principles of engineering that will not be discovered by European builders for centuries. Flying buttresses, pointed arches, and mathematical proportions that will characterize Gothic architecture are already present in these ancient Jewish constructions, suggesting that the master builders of medieval cathedrals are recovering rather than inventing their most sophisticated techniques. The astronomical instruments they find include devices that demonstrate ancient knowledge of the Earth's rotation, the precession of the equinoxes, and celestial mechanics that medieval scholars believe were unknown to the ancients. Star charts carved in stone show constellations with precision that suggests systematic observation over centuries, while mathematical calculations reveal understanding of trigonometry and spherical geometry that will not reappear in European scholarship until the Renaissance. The religious artifacts challenge Orthodox Christian teaching in ways that force the knights to confront fundamental questions about their faith. They find evidence of Jewish Christian communities that survived the destruction of Jerusalem, preserving traditions that present Jesus not as the unique Son of God, but as one of many Jewish teachers who achieved divine consciousness through initiation into ancient mysteries. These texts suggest that early Christianity was far more diverse than the unified orthodoxy that emerged from the 4th century councils. The most controversial discovery comes in the form of genealogical records that appear to trace the bloodline of the Davidic kings through the centuries following the temple's destruction. If authentic, these documents suggest that the royal line of Israel survived in secret, preserved by families who maintained their identity and their claims to legitimacy through careful record-keeping and strategic marriages. The implications for medieval politics, where royal legitimacy depends on divine sanction, are staggering. As I observe these phantom knights working by torchlight in chambers that have not seen human presence for nearly a millennium, I understand that they are not just treasure hunters, but archaeologists of the sacred, recovering wisdom that Orthodox Christianity has lost or deliberately suppressed. Their discoveries will transform them from simple crusaders into guardians of secrets that could reshape the religious and political landscape of medieval Europe. The knowledge they gain in these underground chambers will explain their rapid transformation from poor knights into the most powerful organization in Christendom. They have discovered not just material treasure, but intellectual capital, ancient wisdom that gives them advantages in everything from architecture to astronomy, from theology to international finance. The real treasure of the Knights Templar lies not in any hoard of gold and silver, but in their recovery of the lost wisdom of the ancient world. Standing in these phantom chambers as the knights complete their excavations, I realize that they have uncovered something far more dangerous than material wealth. They have found knowledge that challenges the very foundations of medieval civilization, wisdom that could either transform or destroy the world they know. We pray through the phantom counting houses of Paris, London, and Venice, where Templar treasurers manage financial operations that span continents and currencies, their ledgers recording transactions that dwarf the treasuries of kings. The gold that flows through their hands seems to multiply by some alchemical process that turns modest donations into vast fortunes, simple pilgrim fees into international banking empires. Brother Geoffrey de Charny, the Templar treasurer in Paris, moves through his scriptorium with the quiet confidence of a man who understands money in ways that medieval merchants can barely comprehend. His innovations in banking, letters of credit, international currency exchange, compound interest calculations, represent advances in financial science that will not be matched by secular institutions for centuries. Yet the source of the capital that makes these innovations possible remains as mysterious as the knight's original mission in Jerusalem. The Templar banking system operates on principles that seem to violate the Church's prohibition against usury, while somehow maintaining papal approval. They lend money to kings and emperors at rates that would be considered usurious if charged by Jewish moneylenders. Yet their transactions are blessed by bishops and sanctioned by papal bulls. The secret lies in their mastery of financial instruments, so sophisticated that they appear to be gifts rather than loans, donations rather than investments. I observe the careful way they establish their network of commanderies across Europe, each one serving as both monastery and bank, fortress and financial center. The architecture of these buildings reveals knowledge of defensive engineering that surpasses anything known to medieval military science, while their treasuries employ security measures that suggest understanding of metallurgy, locksmithing, and architectural principles that seem almost supernatural in their sophistication. The source of their initial capital becomes clearer as I examine the artifacts flowing from their excavations beneath the Temple Mount. Ancient coins, precious metals, and gemstones provide the foundation for their wealth, but the real treasure lies in their knowledge of ancient trade routes, forgotten mining locations, and commercial techniques preserved in the scrolls they discovered in Solomon's vaults. They possess maps that show gold deposits in regions that European merchants have never explored, silver mines that have been lost since Roman times, and trade routes that connect Europe with Asia through paths that bypass the traditional commercial centers. King Louis VII of France becomes their first major debtor, borrowing vast sums to finance the Second Crusade. The terms of his loan reveal the sophistication of Templar financial planning. They charge no interest, but require payment in the form of territorial grants, tax exemptions, and commercial privileges that prove far more valuable than simple monetary return. Within a generation, they own more land in France than many dukes, control more trade routes than the greatest merchants, and possess more liquid capital than the royal treasury itself. The English operations, centered in their massive complex in London, demonstrate their mastery of international finance. They serve as bankers to King Henry II, managing the vast revenues from his Angevin Empire, while simultaneously lending money to his enemies and allies alike. Their political neutrality, guaranteed by their religious status, allows them to profit from conflicts that bankrupt secular institutions. They finance both sides of wars, collect debts from winners and losers alike, and emerge from each political crisis wealthier and more powerful than before. Brother Henry de Montfort, the Templar treasurer in London, maintains correspondence with banking houses from Seville to Constantinople, coordinating currency exchanges and international transfers that require mathematical skills unknown to most medieval scholars. His calculations involve not just simple arithmetic, but complex algorithms that account for seasonal variations in exchange rates, political instability in different regions, and the relative purity of various coinages. These techniques suggest access to mathematical knowledge that will not reappear in European scholarship until the Renaissance. The Templar fleet, operating from ports in the Mediterranean and Atlantic, carries more than just pilgrims and crusaders. Their ships transport goods that generate profits far exceeding the costs of their military operations, while their knowledge of navigation techniques allows them to reach markets that other merchants cannot access. They possess charts that show islands and coastlines unknown to conventional geography, while their captains employ astronomical navigation methods that suggest understanding of celestial mechanics centuries ahead of their time. The agricultural innovations implemented on their estates demonstrate knowledge of farming techniques that increase productivity far beyond medieval norms. They introduce crop rotation systems, irrigation methods, and selective breeding programs that transform marginal lands into profitable enterprises. Their monasteries become centers of technological innovation, developing new tools, new techniques, and new approaches to land management that spread throughout Europe through their network of affiliated institutions. The architectural projects they sponsor reveal access to engineering knowledge that surpasses anything known to medieval builders. The Gothic cathedrals that rise across Europe during the height of Templar power employ construction techniques that seem to appear from nowhere. Mathematical principles that suggest understanding of structural engineering centuries ahead of their time. The master builders who design these monuments often have connections to Templar commanderies, while the financing for their construction frequently involves Templar banks. I watch as their wealth attracts the attention of kings who begin to realize that these supposedly poor monks have become richer than royal treasuries. Philip IV of France, drowning in debt from his wars with England and Flanders, looks upon Templar wealth with the calculating gaze of a ruler who understands that their religious protection may not be sufficient to shield them from royal greed. The very success of their financial empire begins to generate the political pressures that will ultimately destroy them. The mystery deepens as I examine their internal records, written in codes that suggest knowledge of cryptographic techniques unknown to medieval scholarship. Their communications employ ciphers that will not be broken until the 20th century, while their accounting methods use mathematical symbols that appear nowhere else in medieval literature. These innovations suggest access to intellectual traditions that Orthodox European scholarship has never encountered. The transformation of 9 poor knights into international bankers represents more than simple financial success. It demonstrates the power of ancient knowledge applied to medieval conditions. The wisdom they discovered beneath the Temple Mount has given them advantages that their contemporaries cannot understand or replicate, turning archaeological discoveries into economic dominance that will reshape the political landscape of medieval Europe. Standing in the phantom treasury of the Paris Temple as Templar bankers count coins from across the known world, I realize that their wealth represents something far more significant than material success. They have discovered the alchemical secret of transforming knowledge into power, ancient wisdom into modern influence, archaeological treasures into financial empires that will outlast kingdoms and reshape the destiny of nations. The Cathedral of Chartres rises from the French countryside like a prayer made manifest in stone, its soaring spires and impossible arches defying every principle of medieval engineering. I walk through its phantom construction site in the year 1194, watching master builders who work with mathematical precision that seems to channel divine inspiration itself. But the deeper I examine their techniques, the more I discover connections to the Knights Templar that suggest these architectural miracles are built upon foundations of ancient knowledge recovered from beneath Solomon's temple. Master Guillaume descends, the architect whose innovations will transform European building techniques, moves through the construction site with blueprints that employ geometric principles unknown to conventional medieval scholarship. His designs incorporate mathematical relationships that echo the proportions described in ancient texts. The golden ratio, sacred geometry, and harmonic principles that connect earthly architecture with celestial harmonies. These are not innovations born from medieval experimentation, but recovered wisdom from civilizations that understood the mystical properties of number and form. I observe the careful way these master builders guard their secrets, passing knowledge from master to apprentice through rituals that mirror the initiation ceremonies of mystery religions. Their guilds operate with levels of secrecy that rival monastic orders, while their symbols and passwords suggest connections to traditions that predate Christianity itself. The tools they use, the techniques they employ, and the mathematical principles they apply all point to sources of knowledge that orthodox medieval scholarship cannot explain. The financing for these massive cathedral projects reveals direct connections to Templar banking operations. The Abbey of Saint Denis, where Abbot Chouget pioneers the Gothic style, receives funding through Templar financial networks that span Europe. The cathedral schools of Chartres and Paris, where the intellectual foundations of Gothic architecture are developed, maintain close relationships with Templar scholars, who possess texts on mathematics, astronomy, and engineering that appear nowhere else in medieval libraries. Brother Thierry of Chartres, the cathedral school's most influential teacher, incorporates geometric principles into his curriculum that suggest access to ancient mathematical texts. His students learn to calculate the proportions of perfect buildings using techniques that echo the methods described in classical sources, while his lectures on the harmony of the spheres reveal understanding of astronomical principles that will not be rediscovered by European scholars until the Renaissance. The symbolic program embedded in these Gothic cathedrals tells stories that Orthodox Christianity has forgotten or deliberately suppressed. The rose windows, with their complex geometric patterns, encode mathematical relationships that connect earthly architecture with cosmic harmonies. The sculptural programs incorporate imagery that draws on traditions far older than Christianity, alchemical symbols, astrological references, and mythological figures that suggest knowledge of mystery traditions that the Church officially condemns. I examine the construction techniques employed by these master builders and discover innovations that seem to appear from nowhere in the historical record. The flying buttress, the pointed arch, and the ribbed vault all represent advances in structural engineering that require understanding of mathematical principles centuries ahead of their time. These techniques allow builders to create spaces of unprecedented height and lightness, transforming heavy Romanesque architecture into the soaring Gothic style that will define medieval spirituality. The Templar connection becomes clearer as I trace the careers of the master builders responsible for these innovations. Many have documented relationships with Templar commanderies, while others receive training in construction techniques at Templar-sponsored schools. The tools they use often bear Templar symbols, while the mathematical principles they employ echo the geometric relationships found in Templar architectural projects across Europe. The coded messages embedded in cathedral architecture reveal a sophisticated system of symbolic communication that operates parallel to Orthodox Christian iconography. alchemical symbols disguised as decorative elements, astronomical references hidden in sculptural programs, and geometric relationships that encode mathematical principles all suggest the existence of an underground tradition of esoteric knowledge that flows through the cathedral building movement. The school of Chartres, where many of these innovations originate, maintains a library that contains texts on mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy that appear nowhere else in medieval Europe. These manuscripts, many written in Arabic and translated by scholars with connections to Templar networks in the Holy Land, preserve ancient Greek and Roman knowledge that Orthodox European scholarship has lost. The geometric principles taught at Chartres echo the mathematical relationships described in these recovered texts. Master Villard de Honnecourt, whose sketchbook preserves the most detailed record of Gothic building techniques, travels extensively throughout Europe, visiting construction sites that receive Templar funding. His drawings reveal understanding of mechanical principles, geometric relationships, and engineering techniques that suggest access to sources of knowledge beyond conventional medieval scholarship. His designs for perpetual motion machines, automatic devices, and complex mechanical systems demonstrate familiarity with technological concepts that will not reappear in European science until the Renaissance. The astronomical alignments built into these Gothic cathedrals reveal knowledge of celestial mechanics that medieval astronomy supposedly does not possess. The orientation of altars, the placement of windows, and the proportions of architectural elements all reflect understanding of the Earth's rotation, the precession of the equinoxes, and other astronomical phenomena that will not be officially recognized by European scholars for centuries. I watch as Templar architects work alongside cathedral builders, sharing knowledge that transforms medieval construction techniques. Their understanding of structural engineering, derived from their study of ancient texts recovered from beneath the Temple Mount, allows them to solve problems that have puzzled builders for generations. The massive stone blocks of Gothic cathedrals are lifted and positioned using techniques that echo the methods employed by the builders of Solomon's Temple, while the mathematical principles underlying their designs reflect geometric relationships described in ancient Jewish and Egyptian sources. The financial networks that support cathedral construction reveal the extent of Templar influence in medieval intellectual life. Their banks provide funding not just for building projects, but for the schools that train architects, the scriptoriums that copy mathematical texts, and the workshops that develop new construction techniques. This investment in intellectual infrastructure creates a feedback loop that accelerates architectural innovation while strengthening Templar influence in European cultural life. The mystery deepens as I examine the symbolic relationships between Templar seals and Gothic architectural elements. The geometric patterns that appear on Templar documents echo the rose window designs of Gothic cathedrals, while the proportional relationships encoded in Templar architecture mirror the mathematical principles underlying cathedral construction. These connections suggest a systematic program of knowledge transmission that operates through symbolic rather than textual communication. Standing in the phantom cathedral of Chartres as its impossible arches reach toward heaven, I realize that these Gothic masterpieces represent more than architectural achievement. They are libraries built in stone, encoding ancient wisdom in forms that will survive the destruction of manuscripts and the persecution of scholars. The Knights Templar have found a way to preserve the knowledge they discovered beneath Solomon's temple by embedding it in the very fabric of medieval civilization, ensuring that their secrets will endure as long as these cathedrals stand. The dawn of Friday, October 13th, 1307, breaks over France like the opening of a tomb, its pale light illuminating a kingdom where every Templar commandery will be simultaneously raided by royal agents carrying sealed orders that have been prepared in absolute secrecy. I stand in the phantom chambers of King Philip IV as he puts into motion the most coordinated arrest operation in medieval history, his pale eyes reflecting the cold calculation of a monarch who has decided that the wealth of the Knights Templar must become the salvation of his bankrupt kingdom. The sealed orders, prepared by Philip's chancellor Guillaume de Nogaret, bear the royal seal and carry instructions so precise that they read like a military campaign plan. Every Templar house in France is to be surrounded before dawn, every knight arrested without warning, every piece of property seized in the name of the crown. The charges are carefully crafted to justify this unprecedented violation of ecclesiastical immunity: heresy, blasphemy, sodomy, and the worship of a mysterious idol called Baphomet. I observe the careful timing of this operation, coordinated across a kingdom where communication normally takes weeks. The orders were distributed to royal bailiffs and seneschals throughout France, with instructions that they remain sealed until the appointed hour. This level of coordination suggests planning that began months, perhaps years, before the actual arrests, while the specific nature of the charges indicates access to intelligence about Templar practices that could only have come from infiltration of their most secret ceremonies. Brother Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, awakens in his chambers at the Paris Temple to the sound of armed men in the courtyard below. At 70 years of age, he has led the order through its final decades of power and glory, never suspecting that his royal host has been planning his destruction with the methodical precision of a chess master. The irony is bitter. The king who owes the Templars vast sums of money has chosen to solve his debt crisis by destroying his creditors. The Paris Temple, that massive fortress monastery that has served as the financial heart of medieval Europe, falls to royal forces without resistance. The Templars, bound by their vows of obedience to secular authority, offer no violence to the king's men, even as they are shackled and led away to dungeons that will become their tombs. Their treasuries, their libraries, their archives, all pass into royal hands in a single morning's work. But the greatest prize eludes Philip's grasp. The Templar fleet, anchored at La Rochelle under the command of experienced naval officers, receives warning of the arrests through channels that royal intelligence has never penetrated. 18 ships slip their moorings in the pre-dawn darkness, carrying cargoes that will never be inventoried by royal officials. The treasure that Philip seeks, whether gold and silver or something far more precious, disappears into the Atlantic mists like a dream that dissolves upon waking. I watch as similar scenes unfold across France, from the great commanderies of Champagne to the remote preceptories of the Pyrenees.
Royal agents, armed with detailed lists of Templar properties and personnel, execute their orders with mechanical precision. Yet, everywhere, they find the same frustrating pattern. The most valuable items have vanished, the most important documents have been destroyed, the most knowledgeable knights have somehow escaped the net that was supposed to capture them all. The charges against the Templars reveal the sophistication of Philip's propaganda campaign. The accusations of heresy and blasphemy are carefully crafted to exploit popular suspicions about the order's secretive practices, while the specific details suggest testimony from informants who have witnessed Templar initiation ceremonies. The most damaging charge, that the knights worship a demonic idol called Baphomet, taps into deep-seated fears about the corruption that wealth and power can bring to religious institutions.
Guillaume de Nogaret, Philip's chief minister and the architect of this operation, moves through the captured Templar properties with the systematic thoroughness of a man who understands that this is his one opportunity to solve the kingdom's financial crisis. His agents inventory every piece of silver, every land grant, every commercial privilege that the Templars have accumulated over 2 centuries of growth. Yet the totals fall far short of the vast wealth that royal intelligence had expected to find. The mystery deepens as royal investigators examine the Templar archives and discover that the most important documents have been systematically removed. The records of their excavations beneath the Temple Mount, their correspondence with mysterious contacts in the East, their financial dealings with Jewish and Muslim merchants, all have vanished as completely as if they never existed. What remains are routine administrative documents that reveal nothing about the sources of Templar wealth or the nature of their secret knowledge. Brother Geoffroy de Charnay, the Templar preceptor of Normandy, and one of the order's most senior officials, faces his interrogators with the stoic dignity of a man who has prepared for this moment throughout his career. His responses to their questions reveal nothing about Templar secrets, while demonstrating the sophisticated legal training that many knights have received. These are not simple soldiers, but educated men who understand the political and legal implications of their situation. The papal response to Philip's actions reveals the complex political calculations underlying this crisis. Pope Clement V, a Frenchman who owes his position to Philip's support, finds himself caught between his obligation to protect a religious order and his dependence on royal favor. His initial protests against the arrests gradually give way to cooperation with the investigation, while his demands for papal control over the proceedings are quietly ignored by royal officials. The interrogation techniques employed against the captured Templars reveal the influence of Inquisition methods that have been refined through decades of persecution against Cathars and other heretics. Physical torture, psychological pressure, and the promise of mercy for those who confess create conditions that will eventually break even the strongest resistance. Yet, the confessions that emerge under torture prove remarkably consistent, suggesting either genuine guilt or careful coaching of the interrogators. As I observe the systematic destruction of the most powerful organization in medieval Europe, I realize that Philip has achieved something unprecedented in the history of royal power. He has successfully challenged the independence of an international religious order,
seized its wealth for secular purposes, and justified his actions through charges that will be accepted by public opinion. The precedent he establishes will reshape the relationship between church and state for centuries to come. Standing in the phantom chambers of the Paris Temple as royal agents catalog its treasures, I understand that this Friday the 13th marks more than the end of the Knights Templar. It represents the triumph of royal absolutism over ecclesiastical independence, the victory of secular power over religious authority, and the beginning of a new age in which kings will no longer tolerate institutions that rival their own power. The dungeons beneath the Château de Vincennes echo with screams that will haunt French history for centuries, as royal inquisitors apply techniques perfected against Cathars and heretics to extract confessions from knights who have spent their lives defending Christendom. I descend stone steps slick with moisture and despair, entering chambers where the most powerful military order in medieval Europe is systematically broken through methods that transform proud warriors into babbling penitents willing to confess to any crime their torturers suggest. Brother Geoffroy de Charny, the Templar preceptor of Normandy, hangs from chains that have dislocated his shoulders, his body bearing the marks of interrogation techniques that push the boundaries of what medieval law considers acceptable even for heretics. The royal inquisitors, led by the Dominican friar Guillaume de Paris, work with the methodical precision of men who understand that their task is not to discover truth, but to manufacture evidence that will justify the king's actions. The confession protocols reveal the sophisticated psychology underlying this persecution. The interrogators begin with minor accusations, irregularities in religious observance, violations of monastic discipline, before gradually escalating to charges of heresy and blasphemy. Each admission, extracted through pain and exhaustion, becomes the foundation for more serious accusations, creating a cascade of self-incrimination that transforms victims into accomplices in their own destruction. I observe the careful way these confessions are recorded by scribes who understand that their documents will be scrutinized by papal investigators and foreign diplomats. The Latin is precise, the legal terminology exact, the procedural requirements meticulously observed. These are not crude transcripts of torture sessions, but sophisticated legal documents designed to withstand the most rigorous examination by canon lawyers and theological experts. The charges against the Templars reveal the influence of popular superstitions and theological anxieties that have been carefully exploited by royal propagandists. The accusation that knights spit upon the cross during initiation ceremonies taps into fears about the corruption of religious symbols, while the claim that they worship a demonic idol called Baphomet exploits anxieties about the influence of Eastern mysticism on Christian institutions. Brother Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master whose leadership has guided the order through its final decades, faces interrogation with the dignity of a man who understands that his words will echo through history. His initial refusal to confess gradually gives way under torture to admissions that he will later recant, creating a pattern of confession and retraction that will characterize the entire proceedings. His tormentors understand that breaking the Grand Master's resistance is essential to legitimizing the destruction of his order. The theological experts brought in to evaluate Templar practices include some of medieval Europe's most sophisticated scholars, men who understand the fine distinctions between orthodox and heretical belief. Their analysis of the accusations reveals the careful way charges have been crafted to exploit ambiguities in canon law, while avoiding claims that could be easily disproven. The result is a case that appears legally sound, while resting on foundations of torture and coercion. The mystery of the Templar treasure deepens as interrogators focus obsessively on the location of the order's wealth. Every night is questioned about hidden caches, secret accounts, and mysterious shipments that departed La Rochelle before the arrests. Yet the answers they extract under torture prove frustratingly vague. References to the treasure of the temple that could mean anything from gold and silver to sacred relics to ancient manuscripts.
I watch as Brother Ponsard de Gizy, the Templar treasurer of the Paris Commandery, endures interrogation techniques designed to break his knowledge of the order's financial operations. His responses, carefully parsed by royal accountants, reveal a banking system so sophisticated that its full extent cannot be comprehended by medieval investigators. The Templars have created financial instruments, international networks, and commercial relationships that transcend the understanding of their persecutors. The confessions extracted from ordinary knights reveal the existence of initiation ceremonies that Orthodox Christianity finds deeply disturbing. References to secret rituals, mysterious passwords, and esoteric knowledge suggest that the Templars have indeed developed practices that go beyond conventional monastic observance. Yet the specific details remain frustratingly elusive, filtered through the distorting lens of torture and the limited understanding of interrogators who lack the theological sophistication to interpret what they are hearing. The papal commissioners sent to investigate the proceedings find themselves caught between their obligation to ensure canonical procedures and their recognition that royal power has already determined the outcome. Pope Clement V's instructions emphasize the need for careful legal procedures, but his commissioners understand that challenging the king's evidence too vigorously could result in their own persecution. The result is a judicial process that maintains the appearance of legitimacy while serving the interests of royal policy. The international implications of the Templar persecution become clear as news of the arrests spreads across Europe. Kings in England, Aragon, and other realms face pressure to follow Philip's example, while the Pope struggles to maintain some semblance of ecclesiastical independence in the face of royal determination. The precedent being established will reshape the relationship between church and state throughout medieval Europe. The most disturbing confessions concern the alleged worship of Baphomet, described by tortured knights as a bearded head that speaks prophecies and grants the order its power. The descriptions vary so wildly, sometimes a skull, sometimes a cat, sometimes a hermaphroditic figure, that they suggest either deliberate fabrication or the distorted memories of men driven to madness by torture. Yet these testimonies will become central to the case against the Templars. As months pass and the interrogations continue, a pattern emerges that reveals the systematic nature of this persecution. Knights who confess are promised mercy, but continue to face imprisonment and degradation.
Those who maintain their innocence face escalating torture until they break or die. The few who are released find themselves stripped of property and status, living reminders of what happens to those who challenge royal power. The destruction of Templar libraries and archives proceeds parallel to the persecution of their members. Documents that might reveal the true sources of their wealth or the nature of their secret knowledge are systematically destroyed, while the manuscripts that survive are carefully edited to remove any references that might embarrass the crown. The result is a historical record that has been deliberately corrupted to serve the interests of the persecutors. Standing in the phantom torture chambers where the Knights Templar meet their doom, I realize that this persecution represents more than the destruction of a religious order. It marks the triumph of royal absolutism over all competing sources of authority, the victory of political expediency over legal procedure, and the establishment of precedents that will echo through European history whenever rulers decide that their survival requires the destruction of institutions that rival their power. The screams that echo through these dungeons carry within them the death cries of medieval Christendom's most powerful institution, but they also herald the birth of a new age in which kings will brook no rivals to their absolute authority.
The flames that consume Jacques de Molay and Geoffroy de Charnay on the Île aux Juifs in the Seine cast dancing shadows across the faces of Parisians who have gathered to witness the final act of the Templar tragedy. I stand among the phantom crowd on this March evening in 1314, feeling the heat of the pyre that will burn not just two men, but the last remnants of the most powerful organization in medieval Europe. The Grand Master's voice rises above the crackling flames, pronouncing words that will echo through French history like a curse written in fire and blood. God knows the truth of our innocence, Jacques de Molay declares, his 70-year-old voice carrying across the water with supernatural clarity. I call upon God to witness that we die innocent of the crimes laid against us. I call upon the Pope and the King to answer before God's tribunal within the year for the injustice they have done to us. The crowd falls silent as these words hang in the evening air like smoke from the burning wood, and I feel the weight of prophecy settling over the scene like a shroud. The political calculations that led to this moment reveal the complex web of interests that have converged to destroy the Knights Templar. King Philip IV, drowning in debt from his wars with England and Flanders, has seized Templar wealth to finance his kingdom's survival. Pope Clement V, a French puppet who owes his papal throne to Philip's influence, has sacrificed the Templars to maintain his precarious position. The result is a judicial murder that violates every principle of canon law while serving the immediate interests of both crown and papacy. Brother Geoffroy de Charnay, the Templar preceptor of Normandy, who has endured 7 years of imprisonment and torture, faces his death with the stoic dignity that has characterized his order throughout its persecution. His final words, spoken as the flames reach his feet, concern not his own fate, but the preservation of Templar secrets that royal investigators have never been able to uncover. "The treasure is safe," he whispers to his Grand Master, "hidden where neither king nor pope will ever find it." The crowd that witnesses this execution includes representatives from across European society, nobles who have profited from the seizure of Templar lands, merchants who have taken over Templar commercial operations,
clergy who have inherited Templar ecclesiastical privileges. Yet there is an unease in their faces, a recognition that they are witnessing something that violates the natural order of medieval society. The destruction of a religious order by secular authority sets a precedent that threatens every institution that claims independence from royal power. I observe the careful way royal officials document this final scene, ensuring that the legal requirements for executing relapsed heretics are meticulously observed. The presence of ecclesiastical authorities, the reading of the charges, the opportunity for final confession, all are performed with the precision of men who understand that history will judge their actions. Yet beneath this legal theater lies the brutal reality of political murder disguised as religious justice. The mystery of the Templar treasure reaches its climax as the flames consume the two men who possessed the most complete knowledge of its location and nature. 7 years of torture and interrogation have failed to extract the secrets that died with Jacques de Molay and Geoffroy de Charnay.
The curse that Jacques de Molay pronounces from the flames will prove remarkably prescient. Pope Clement V will die of a mysterious illness within 5 weeks of the execution, his body racked by symptoms that medieval physicians cannot explain. King Philip IV will follow him to the grave before the year ends, killed in a hunting accident that contemporaries will interpret as divine judgment. The Capetian dynasty that has ruled France for 3 centuries will end within 14 years, its last direct male heir dying without issue. The international repercussions of the Templar destruction spread across Europe like ripples from a stone cast into still water. In England, King Edward II reluctantly follows Philip's example, but finds little Templar wealth to confiscate. In Aragon and Portugal, Templar properties are transferred to other military orders rather than seized by the crown. In the Holy Roman Empire, the persecution proceeds half-heartedly, with many knights escaping to regions where imperial authority cannot reach them. The fate of the Templar fleet that escaped from La Rochelle becomes the subject of legends that will persist for centuries. 18 ships carrying unknown cargoes disappear into the Atlantic, their destination and ultimate fate remaining one of history's great mysteries. Some will claim they sailed to Scotland, where Robert the Bruce offers sanctuary to enemies of the French king. Others suggest they reached the Americas, carrying Templar treasures to hiding places that will not be discovered for centuries. The transformation of Jacques de Molay from Grand Master to martyr begins even before his ashes cool in the Seine. Popular ballads celebrate his courage in the face of persecution, while underground traditions preserve memories of Templar innocence that official history has tried to erase. The order that Philip sought to destroy through legal proceedings becomes more powerful in death than it ever was in life, its martyred leaders inspiring resistance movements that will challenge royal authority for generations. The theological implications of the Templar persecution extend far beyond the fate of a single religious order. The precedent established by Philip's actions, that secular rulers can destroy ecclesiastical institutions through manufactured charges of heresy, will be invoked by kings throughout Europe whenever they need to eliminate rivals to their authority. The independence of the Church, already weakened by the Avignon papacy, suffers a blow from which it will never fully recover. The economic consequences of Templar destruction prove equally significant.
The sophisticated banking system they created collapses overnight, leaving a vacuum in international finance that will not be filled for decades. The technological innovations they sponsored, the architectural projects they funded, the commercial networks they maintained, all suffer from the sudden removal of their organizing intelligence and financial support. As the flames die down and the crowd disperses into the Parisian night, I realize that this execution marks more than the end of the Knights Templar. It represents the death of medieval Christendom's dream of institutions that could transcend national boundaries and royal authority. The international religious orders, the universal church, the cosmopolitan ideal of Christian unity, all are weakened by the precedent established on this March evening in 1314. Standing beside the dying embers of the pyre that consumed the last Grand Master, I understand that Jacques de Molay's curse will prove more durable than the kingdom that destroyed him. The treasure he protected with his life, whether gold and silver or ancient wisdom, has passed beyond the reach of kings and popes, hidden in places where it will wait for centuries before revealing itself to those worthy of its secrets.
The mists of Scotland roll across the highlands like the breath of ancient gods, concealing valleys where fugitive knights have found sanctuary beyond the reach of French royal authority and papal persecution. I walk through the phantom glens of Argyll and the Western Isles, where Templar survivors have established hidden communities that preserve not just their lives, but the secrets that died with Jacques de Molay in the flames of Paris. Here, in a land torn by war with England, Robert the Bruce offers protection to enemies of his enemies, creating a refuge where the scattered remnants of the temple can regroup and plan for an uncertain future. Brother William de la More, the last Templar master in England who escaped royal custody through the intervention of Scottish allies, moves through the Highland mist with the careful steps of a man who understands that his survival depends on absolute secrecy. His small band of followers includes not just knights who fled the persecution, but also craftsmen, scholars, and financiers who possessed knowledge too valuable to be lost in the general destruction of their order. They carry with them more than personal possessions. They bear the accumulated wisdom of 2 centuries of Templar operations. The castle of Kilmorey, perched on a rocky outcrop overlooking the Sound of Jura, serves as one of several hidden sanctuaries where Templar traditions continue under new names and altered forms. The local clan chiefs, bound to Robert the Bruce by oaths of loyalty and mutual interest, provide protection in exchange for services that only the Templars can offer. Advanced military engineering, sophisticated financial planning, and knowledge of international affairs that proves invaluable to a kingdom fighting for its independence. I observe the careful way these Templar survivors adapt their traditions to Highland conditions. The elaborate ceremonies of their French commanderies give way to simpler rituals that can be performed in cave chapels and forest clearings. Their distinctive white mantles with red crosses are replaced by Highland dress that allows them to blend with the local population. Yet beneath these surface changes, the essential elements of Templar identity persist: their commitment to secrecy, their loyalty to fallen comrades, and their determination to preserve the knowledge they have sworn to protect. The treasure that escaped from La Rochelle finds its way to these Scottish hideouts through routes that royal investigators will never discover.
Ships flying the flags of Flemish merchants or Hanseatic traders dock at remote highland harbors, their cargoes transferred to pack trains that disappear into the mountains along paths known only to local guides. The gold and silver that Philip sought to confiscate becomes the foundation for new enterprises that will influence Scottish history for centuries to come. Brother Henry Sinclair, a Scottish noble with Templar connections whose family has long maintained ties to the order, oversees the construction of Rosslyn Chapel near Edinburgh. This extraordinary building, begun in 1446, incorporates architectural elements and symbolic programs that clearly derive from Templar traditions. Its stone carvings include imagery that connect Christian symbolism with pre-Christian traditions, while its mathematical proportions echo the sacred geometry that the Templars discovered in their excavations beneath Solomon's Temple. The chapel's famous apprentice pillar tells a story that resonates with Templar themes of hidden knowledge and tragic sacrifice. According to legend, a master mason's apprentice carved this magnificent column based on a vision he received in dreams, only to be murdered by his jealous master when the work proved superior to anything the older craftsman could create. The pillar itself incorporates spiral designs that echo the columns of Solomon's Temple, while its base includes carvings that suggest knowledge of New World flora decades before Columbus's official discovery of America.
The influence of Templar survivors extends beyond architecture into the realm of exploration and discovery. The Sinclair family's connections to Templar networks may explain the remarkable voyage of Henry Sinclair, Earl of Orkney, who allegedly reached the Americas in 1398, nearly a century before Columbus. The evidence for this journey includes carved stones in Nova Scotia that bear symbols associated with Templar traditions, while local Mi'kmaq legends speak of white-robed visitors who arrived from across the sea carrying sacred knowledge. The transformation of Templar traditions in Scotland reveals the adaptability that has always characterized the order. Unable to operate openly as a religious military organization, they evolve into something new, a network of craftsmen, merchants, and scholars who maintain their connections through shared symbols, common interests, and mutual obligations. The stonemasons who build Scotland's castles and churches, the merchants who finance its trade, and the scholars who preserve its learning all show signs of Templar influence. I watch as these Scottish Templars develop new forms of organization that will eventually evolve into the craft guilds and secret societies that will play crucial roles in Scottish history. The lodge system that emerges in the 16th century incorporates elements that clearly derive from Templar traditions. Initiation ceremonies, symbolic teachings, and hierarchical structures that preserve ancient knowledge while adapting to changing circumstances. The Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, where Robert the Bruce defeats a much larger English army, may have been influenced by Templar military expertise. Contemporary accounts describe a mysterious cavalry charge that appears at the crucial moment of the battle, turning potential defeat into decisive victory. Some historians suggest that this intervention came from Templar knights fighting under Scottish banners, their superior training and equipment proving decisive in Scotland's struggle for independence. The financial networks that the Templars establish in Scotland operate with the same sophistication that characterized their international banking operations. They develop new forms of credit, establish trade relationships with continental merchants,
and create commercial enterprises that generate wealth while maintaining the secrecy essential to their survival. The economic prosperity that Scotland enjoys in the late medieval period may owe more to Templar financial expertise than conventional history acknowledges. The preservation of Templar knowledge in Scottish libraries and archives creates repositories of learning that will influence European intellectual development for centuries. Manuscripts on mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy that disappeared from French and English collections during the persecution survive in Scottish monasteries and private libraries. The University of St. Andrews, founded in 1413, shows clear signs of Templar influence in its curriculum and its approach to learning. The mystery deepens as I examine the connections between Scottish Templar survivors and the later development of Freemasonry. The symbolic systems, the initiation rituals, and the organizational structures that characterize Masonic lodges all show clear derivation from Templar traditions. The transformation of a persecuted religious military order into a network of craft guilds and philosophical societies represents one of history's most successful examples of institutional adaptation and survival. Standing in the phantom halls of Rosslyn Chapel as Highland mists swirl around its mysterious carvings, I realize that the Knights Templar achieved something that their persecutors never anticipated. They survived their own destruction by transforming into something new, while preserving the essential elements of their identity. The treasure they protected was never just gold and silver, but knowledge and tradition that proved more durable than any material wealth.
The waters of Mahone Bay lap gently against the shores of Oak Island, Nova Scotia, where the most persistent treasure mystery in North American history has drawn seekers for over 2 centuries. I stand beside the phantom figures of the first treasure hunters in 1795, watching as young Daniel McGuinness discovers a circular depression beneath an ancient oak tree, its branches bearing the scars of rope and tackle that suggest human activity in this remote corner of the New World. What begins as boyish curiosity will evolve into an obsession that consumes fortunes, claims lives, and generates theories that connect this small Canadian island to the lost treasure of the Knights Templar. The Money Pit, as it comes to be known, reveals engineering sophistication that defies explanation by conventional colonial history. Every 10 feet, the diggers encounter platforms of oak logs sealed with ship's putty and coconut fiber, materials that had to be imported from tropical regions thousands of miles away. The precision of the construction, the complexity of the flood tunnels that protect the shaft from intrusion, and the mathematical relationships underlying the entire system suggest knowledge of engineering principles that few 18th century colonists possessed. Brother Henry Sinclair's alleged voyage to Nova Scotia in 1398 provides one possible explanation for the advanced engineering found on Oak Island. If Templar survivors did indeed reach the Americas a century before Columbus, they would have possessed both the motivation to hide their most precious treasures and the technical knowledge to create a repository that could protect them for centuries. The flood tunnel system that guards the Money Pit employs hydraulic principles that echo the sophisticated water management systems found in Templar castles across Europe. I observe the careful way successive generations of treasure hunters approach the Oak Island mystery,
each bringing new technologies and theories to bear on a puzzle that seems to grow more complex with every attempt to solve it. The Onslow Company in 1804, the Truro Company in 1849, the Oak Island Association in 1861, each expedition discovers new evidence of human engineering while failing to reach the treasure that allegedly lies at the bottom of the shaft. The artifacts recovered from Oak Island over 2 centuries of excavation tell a story that spans continents and centuries. Lead crosses bearing Templar symbols, fragments of parchment written in medieval script, pieces of gold chain that suggest substantial wealth, and most mysteriously, coconut fiber that carbon dating places in the 14th century, decades before any known European contact with the Americas. These discoveries, while individually inconclusive, collectively suggest a connection to medieval European civilization that conventional history cannot explain. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who invested in Oak Island treasure hunting operations as a young man and maintained his interest throughout his political career, represents the enduring fascination that this mystery holds for even the most practical minds. His correspondence reveals a man who understood that the Oak Island puzzle involved more than simple treasure hunting. It touched on fundamental questions about pre-Columbian contact between Europe and the Americas, the survival of medieval knowledge traditions, and the possibility that official history has overlooked crucial chapters in the human story. The Legina brothers, whose modern excavation efforts employ ground-penetrating radar, computer modeling, and sophisticated archaeological techniques, have uncovered evidence that suggests the Oak Island project involved multiple phases of construction spanning several centuries. Their discoveries include medieval lead artifacts, fragments of human bone that carbon dating places in the 14th and 15th centuries, and, most intriguingly, traces of gold and silver that suggest the presence of substantial treasure deposits.
The flood tunnel system that protects the money pit demonstrates engineering principles that connect Oak Island to Templar construction techniques found in Europe. The use of coconut fiber as a filtration medium, the precise calculation of water flow rates, and the integration of natural tidal action into an artificial defense system all reflect the kind of hydraulic engineering that the Templars developed for their castle fortifications. The mathematical relationships underlying the tunnel system echo the sacred geometry that the Templars incorporated into their architectural projects. I examine the symbolic elements discovered on Oak Island and find connections to Templar iconography that suggest deliberate placement rather than accidental occurrence. The lead cross found by Gary Drayton bears markings that echo Templar seals, while the stone inscriptions discovered in various locations around the island employ cipher systems that resemble the coded communications used by medieval secret societies. These symbols, if authentic, represent a form of communication that spans centuries and continents. The theories that connect Oak Island to the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or the lost treasures of Solomon's Temple reflect the enduring power of the Templar legend to inspire speculation about hidden knowledge and secret wisdom. While these specific claims may be unprovable, they point to a deeper truth about the Oak Island mystery. It represents humanity's persistent belief that somewhere, somehow, the great secrets of the past have been preserved for those worthy enough to discover them. The financial cost of Oak Island treasure hunting, estimated at over $100 million over 2 centuries, demonstrates the power of this mystery to capture human imagination
and inspire extraordinary commitment. The investors who have funded these expeditions include some of the most successful businessmen and politicians of their eras, suggesting that the Oak Island puzzle appeals to minds that are anything but gullible or romantic. The technological innovations developed for Oak Island excavations have contributed to advances in archaeology, engineering, and historical research that extend far beyond treasure hunting. The techniques pioneered for exploring the Money Pit have been applied to archaeological sites around the world, while the historical research generated by Oak Island investigations has shed new light on medieval navigation, pre-Columbian contact theories, and the survival of ancient knowledge traditions. The environmental evidence from Oak Island tells a story of human activity that predates known European settlement by centuries. Pollen analysis reveals the presence of European plant species in soil layers that carbon dating places in the medieval period, while geological studies show evidence of large-scale excavation and construction that required substantial human resources and advanced planning. The curse associated with Oak Island, the legend that 7 men must die before the treasure is revealed, reflects the dangerous nature of excavations that have claimed multiple lives over 2 centuries. Yet this folklore also connects the island to broader traditions about cursed treasures and hidden knowledge that must be earned through sacrifice and dedication. Standing on the shores of Oak Island, as Atlantic mists swirl around its mysterious landscape, I realize that this small piece of land has become a focal point for humanity's deepest questions about hidden history, lost knowledge, and the possibility that the great secrets of the past are still waiting to be discovered. Whether the Knights Templar actually buried their treasure here may be less important than what the search itself reveals about our persistent belief that truth, like treasure, rewards those who seek it with sufficient dedication and courage.
The 21st century dawns with satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and DNA analysis joining the ancient quest for Templar treasure, as modern technology meets medieval mystery in laboratories and excavation sites across the globe. I walk through the phantom offices of the History Channel, where television producers transform scholarly research into popular entertainment, bringing the Knights Templar mystery to millions of viewers who follow each archaeological discovery with the passion once reserved for religious pilgrimage. Dr. Kathleen Martinez stands in the shadow of Taposiris Magna, west of Alexandria, where her excavations seek the tomb of Cleopatra, but have uncovered artifacts that suggest connections to much later medieval activity. Her discovery of coins bearing Templar symbols in layers that post-date the Crusades raises questions about the extent of Templar operations in Egypt and the possibility that their treasure hunting extended far beyond the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The digital revolution transforms Templar research as historians gain access to archives that were previously restricted or unknown. Satellite imagery reveals the locations of forgotten Templar commanderies, while computer analysis of medieval documents uncovers patterns of financial transactions that suggest the existence of treasure repositories that royal investigators never discovered. The Vatican's secret archives, gradually opening to researchers, yield documents that shed new light on the political calculations underlying the Templar persecution. I observe the work of modern treasure hunters who combine traditional archaeological methods with cutting-edge technology.
The team investigating Rennes-le-Château in southern France employs LiDAR scanning to map underground chambers that may connect to Templar activities in the region, while their analysis of medieval documents reveals coded references to treasure locations that have been hidden in plain sight for centuries. The Oak Island investigation enters a new phase as the Legina brothers' excavations employ techniques that would have seemed magical to earlier treasure hunters. Ground-penetrating radar reveals the existence of underground chambers and tunnels that confirm the artificial nature of the island's construction, while carbon dating of organic materials provides a timeline that supports theories about medieval European activity in the Americas. Professor Scott Wolter, a forensic geologist whose analysis of the Kensington runestone and other controversial artifacts challenges conventional theories about pre-Columbian contact, represents a new generation of researchers who apply scientific methods to historical mysteries. His work on the hooked X symbol, which appears on artifacts from Minnesota to Nova Scotia, suggests the existence of a medieval European presence in North America that official history has overlooked. The genetic analysis of human remains found in Templar contexts provides new insights into the international character of the order and the extent of their operations. DNA studies of skeletons discovered in Templar cemeteries reveal ancestry patterns that connect knights from across Europe, while isotope analysis of their bones shows evidence of extensive travel that supports theories about global Templar networks. The digital reconstruction of destroyed